Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join his mission.
Well, Jesus, in one of the chapters in the book, deals with perseverance in God's consummate purposes. You know, what theologians calls the eschatology of our faith. You know, the end times themes of Scripture. Of course, Jesus unpacks a lot of that in Matthew 24. And in the middle of that chapter, with all of the chaos and the disintegration of the world's systems happening with natural disasters and wars and rumors of wars, and these are words of Jesus, in the middle of all that, he says, "But this gospel will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations." The irony of that, our natural inclinations are to, when trouble comes, is to hole up in our houses, stockpile food, make sure we have cash on hand, protect ourselves. And Jesus says just the opposite is going to happen among God's people. Is during world chaos, there's going to be this exponential rise of world evangelism done by Christians going all over the world at great personal sacrifice to preach the gospel. And he doubles down on it. He says, all over the world to every nation. Wow. I think that's profound. And I think that's a testimony to what is going to happen in God's people during difficult times is we become the best people we could be during difficulty.
And it
because of the grace of God.
Yeah. And it seems to me what you're describing is 2020. Now, I know that the end times, what Jesus was referring to, perhaps is still some time away. We're in the beginning of the end, you could say, perhaps. But you're describing the coronavirus of China right now. I've been working in China for 15 years. You're talking about persecution of believers. We've seen that, since the days of Nero and beyond. And so it sounds to me what you're describing is something that is relevant for us today.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I my personal conviction about the end times is, number one, we don't know the day or the hour. Jesus was very specific about that. Number two, the Apostle Paul speaks of the end times as something that has been happening since the time of Christ. We're in this last age. So in one sense, we have been living in the end times since the time of Christ. So having a long view, Christians, I believe, need to take a longer view of history and recognizing that God has been working out his plan, partly with determination and partly with patience towards human beings. And as we walk with that long view, that Eugene Peterson, a long obedience in the same direction, we recognize God has eternal plans. He's both patient and determined in that working out of that plan. And there are going to be difficulties in every age. Right now in the West, we enjoy relative safety and prosperity, but there are parts of the world right now. You referred to China. There's other parts in North Africa that there's starvation, there is war, there is conflict. There's great upheaval, failed states. These things affect human beings. You think about what's going on in Iran and Iraq for especially for Christians there, what they are dealing with right now. And yet the reports that are coming out of those countries is in the midst of all that upheaval and difficulty and failure of the state, meaning the economy and the safety and all the things we take for granted that governments provide. In the middle of all that, God is doing some amazing things in those countries. The church is flourishing, and they look at us with a little bit of probably appropriate criticism. They say, you folks in the West have no idea what it means to live for Christ, like we do. And we can learn from those folks.
You are absolutely right. Nick Ripken, Insanity of God, often talks about this, how we have so much to learn from our brothers and sisters in chains. I like how a moment ago you talked about Matthew 24:14, in the midst of all this chaos, and we're seeing the Taal volcano in the Philippines just erupt, and evacuations, failed states, etc., what you just mentioned. Then that culmination point, and the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony for all nations, and then the end will come. Reminds me of that culmination, Revelation 7:9, people from every place and tongue and ethno-linguistic tribe standing there before the throne of God. This is where all of history is moving toward.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.